What's going on there, guys? Good afternoon. It's the Earthmaster here on the live stream on this beautiful end of the weekend officially today, right? Friday, July 15th, 2022 is the date, about 12:06 p.m. California time. Latest quake has a whole bunch of ones up here in the area of California, 1.1 at 1 kilometer deep. The latest quake there on the earthquake 3D globe. Let's go ahead and check out the latest activity that is ramping up or continuing to, well, it's actually kind of slowing down a little bit here along the west coast. We have seen quite a bit of activity back building here along the South America region, around the Caribbean plate, and along the Peru-Chile trench there. It's been pretty active overnight. Of course, yesterday we had quite a bit of movement up into the west coast area in California. But we did see some further activity up north as well into the Aleutian Islands of Alaska. Notice over here along the western Pacific, though, things are still at a standstill. I believe that we're still looking at a possibility of some further earthquake activity along the west coast. And these regions here that you're seeing lighten up on the map here, until we see some sufficient large-scale movement here along this area of the plate boundary of the Pacific plate. We see it quite a bit, that teeter-totter effect that we talk about quite a bit on this channel. That's kind of where it's at right now, still working its way here along this area of the world. Until we see some sufficient large-scale movement here, I think we got to watch the west coast pretty closely. Okay, so looking at the activity yesterday, we did have that 4.6 in the Ridgecrest area. That was the strongest aftershock in 2 years for this area. Of course, July 4th, July 5th, 2019, seen the upper 6 and the lower 7 magnitude earthquake for this area. Aftershocks can continue for many years, kind of like we're seeing here in the Ridgecrest area. But overall, folks, yesterday was a very interesting day due to the fact that we were seeing movement all over Southern California light up like crazy. Yesterday morning, I did issue the earthquake watch here for Southern California, just due to the amount of swarming going on all over the southern part of the state. And then later that afternoon, of course, well after I issued the earthquake watch, we've seen that 4.5 come in, 4.6, excuse me, to the Ridgecrest area. So a lot of people tend to think that stuff like this is relieving stress. Well, it may be in some specific fault areas, but regionally as a whole, as we were watching yesterday, Southern California light up with earthquakes within a short amount of time. That's not telling me it's relieving pressure here. That doesn't look like regional release of pressure. That's an increase in pressure within a region. And of course, we've seen it firsthand when the 4.6 popped off. So, you know, to think that these swarms and stuff like this and this earthquake activity is a sign of releasing pressure out here, or a release of regional pressure, is not accurate at all. So it had a whole bunch of people, man, comment, and that's okay. Everyone's, you know, I don't suppress free speech here on this channel. If you have something negative to say, you're more than welcome, as long as it's not within the you know, as long as it's within the community guidelines here of YouTube. But a lot of people just don't, I don't think they understand exactly how the earthquake situation works out here. Whenever we have swarms around a major area, such as the San Andreas Fault, an area that's capable of producing an 8.1, we don't want to see that. That's not releasing pressure. The swarms are building pressure in this region. So, but, you know, you can't knock in common sense to people that don't want to hear it. They're going to believe their beliefs, whether they like it to hear the truth or not. So look at this regional pressure as a western states here, and I'm sure this extends a little bit into Canada, but look how much activity we've seen over the last 24 hours. This is what I'm talking about in regional pressure, all the way from about just north of Yellowstone all the way down into the Intermountain West regions of Utah, all throughout this whole area. You can pretty much draw a line of activity around here. So the North American plate here under quite a bit of stress yesterday and overnight. That is still continuing today. as we're seeing activity light up further inland into the North American plate, with activity into Nevada, and seeing quite a bit of swarming spread out here throughout the Utah area. Look at Washington as well. That's quite a bit of movement up here for the state of Washington. Not any large-scale activity. Let's go back to the 2.5 and above. 2.5 and above only shows us a little bit of movement throughout Nevada, northern Cal. Of course, the 4.6 there in Ridgecrest. There's some of the activity that was kicking up in the Little Creek area prior to the 4.6 that struck up here north. And, you know, a lot of people think that, well, whatever's going on down here, it's not making any kind of difference up here. It's not going to affect the fault system way up here. That's absolutely wrong, because, like I keep mentioning, as a regional whole, okay, we're little ants, right? Yeah. The distance from Los Angeles to Ridgecrest as an ant such as us is a long ways away, right? How could that even affect? But you got to look at the big picture. These are plates floating around on pretty much liquid, right? And they're moving around like jigsaw puzzles, little cracked eggshells, and they get scooted around. So there's no doubt that I'd like to look at plates as a whole, right? There's the activity that's ongoing here along the eastern section of the Pacific Plate. Whatever goes on here can ultimately have an effect thousands of miles away. So why wouldn't an area that's only separated by 100 or so miles not affect one another? I mean, we've seen that activity ramp up yesterday, and of course regional pressure seemed to work its way up north. That's when we've seen that 4.6 strike. So kind of trying to point out what my observations are and what I see. I'm not just some guy out here just showing maps and stuff. I have knowledge in this stuff. I'm going to school for it right now. I've been studying earthquakes since 2005, 2006. I do plan on getting a pretty sufficient degree, but it takes time and a lot of work. Speaking of work, I have to do a lot of summer class work today. Taking summer classes, fall classes, spring classes. You know, all this knowledge I try to put back into the channel to hopefully be of some use to folks out here. But then again, the naysayers, oh, there's no way. No way. All right. Anyway, this is a weak fault. Dr. Lucy Jones talks about this on her Twitter page, her personal blog. Weak fault is a system, or a fault system, that's got so much strain built up in it that there's not going to be anything we can do to stop it from happening. Any little swarm, any little movement could trigger this big one here, the 8.1. This area does have an absence, a gap right here from this earthquake that struck back in 1812 is 7.5. They still consider this a southern portion of the San Andreas Fault, but it's this segment right here that has not seen any release of pressure at all in over 300 years. And this map goes back, well, I put it 1400, but we know it's not going to cover all the earthquakes in 1400. But record keeping, 7.0 and above. Northern sections had a release of pressure. It's this little area down here, folks, that you know, is where they say the big one's going to happen. So swarms around it, I don't think that's a good thing. It's not releasing pressure, it's increasing pressure in the region. All right, let's move on. Let's see what we got out here along the eastern part of Sierra Nevada. It's been fairly active, folks. I mean, I don't need to tell you that, but look at that. Quite a bit of activity up and down the board. The Bay Area seen a little bit of movement outside of the San Mateo area, it looks like, near Pacifica, 1.9, and a couple other smaller quakes around the Bay. A little bit of movement, although not. This area looks a little quiet for the this is the creeping section of the San Andreas Fault. Normally there should be a couple microquakes on here at least, but this area has gone awfully quiet, and it's a little on the worrisome side. Sometimes these guys do get some larger earthquakes as well, but I just find that kind of strange with a lack of activity along that area right now. Up into Oregon, some movement. I'm going to bet this is a Cascadia quake. Yep. 1.7 near the Reedsport area of Oregon, but underneath 36.6 kilometers. That's way down there into the Cascadia megathrust. Of course, the subduction zone starts right here. It extends and dips underneath the North American plate here, and that's why the deep earthquake activity, 36 kilometers, is occurring with that 1.7 there. So a little bit of activity still ramping up in this region. Tremor map. Let me check here. Oh, by the way, this is off the Wikipedia article on that 8.1. A lot of people don't think it's possible. Well, southern segment. It does stretch from Parkfield and Monterey County all the way to the Salton Seas, capable of an 8.1 magnitude earthquake. There we go. But it's been studied. It's been looked at, and a lot of geologists, seismologists agree that it's long overdue and at least an 8.1. All right, tremor map last night did show some activity here into southern Oregon. Again, this is down dip into the Cascadia subduction zone, about 45 kilometers down there into the slippage area. This is where tremor activity occurs. It's kind of like a slow slip event between the plates here, or underneath the plates, a subduction zone. So it's kind of where this looks like this activity is just north of where that swarming is, but a little, maybe a little bit more upstream, 36 kilometers for that little earthquake. So regionally, still a whole bunch of pressure out here along the Cascadia and the west coast in general. So I am certainly leaving up the earthquake watch for now. Washington, some activity out through the Yakima area and up into the Seattle region. See, a couple of those pretty deep. Look at this earthquake here, 50 kilometers. That is way down there. You got to remember the Cascadia extends up here too, and it ultimately ends right about here, where the North American Pacific Plate boundary meet. Within this area, you got the well, a lot of people just like to call it the Juan de Fuca plate, but there's actually 3 separate microplates here. You got the Explorer plate that separates right about here north. You got the Juan de Fuca plate here in the middle, the larger one of the 3, and then down here, right about here south, is the Gorda plate. So technically 3 little microplates that have been subducting underneath the North American plate for quite a while. Last major rupture of this thing was 1700 when a 9.0 earthquake struck out here, and ultimately did quite a bit of damage. Luckily, wasn't super populated back then, but it is coming. That's an earthquake that will be coming to the Pacific Northwest one day. When? We don't know exactly, but hopefully we'll be able to use some science and data and look back on graphs and maps to hopefully maybe look at things and think, wow, this occurs before the big one, or who knows. All right, guys, let's see. Texas, Oklahoma, not a whole lot going on throughout this region aside from some heat, which we're dealing with as well here in California. A little swarm of activity outside of Pecos, Texas. A couple 2s kicking off out there in the oil fields and the pumping operations, the older ones it looks like. Quite a few in this area. These are not desert towns or desert farmhouses. These are injection wells. You can see all the little ponds or dry ponds. A lot of older ones out here too. Well, this area does see quite a bit of swarming due to the damage there in the land, under the land I should say. Here's the activity kind of ramping up around Puerto Rico. We've seen quite a bit of movement in that area today. Also near the Dominican Republic, seen a 4.0. Definitely been back building quite a bit here from the east, working its way west. Got an earthquake up here near the Ecuador area, 5.7 coming in over this morning it looks like, or late last night, excuse me, late last night time frame, and some further deep activity into the Peru-Chile Trench. Alaska, seen all that movement ramping up here along the Aleutian Trench. Quite a few microquakes up there as well. See if anything's happened on Hawaii with all this activity. It doesn't look like it, but definitely getting some deeper earthquake activity. See what we got here. 41 kilometers for one of these earthquakes here outside of the Kilauea volcano, and our typical swarming area around Pahala with typical deep activity in the 30 to 35 kilometer range for that region. And looking out across the Pacific, things have toned down here, folks. Obviously, we still have pressure building here in this area, but not enough to create anything above the 4.0 threshold, it looks like. A little activity outside of Taiwan and the Philippines area, west of Manila. Low activity in the Vanuatu area and also the Tonga region. Further west here, we got the a little 4.9 out here in the mid-Indian basin off the plate boundary at 10 kilometers. Let's see what we got. Historical data. Well, yeah, there's definitely some activity out there. I just haven't seen any there in quite a while. Looks like some big ones can pop off there as well in that area of the world. Let's see what else we got. Not a whole lot in the Atlantic right now, folks. I think definitely have to be... We can pretty much see exactly where all this activity is occurring. I still think the West Coast has possibility of seeing some further movement until we see some sufficient activity, large-scale activity, or super deep... sometimes super deep activity here along the Fiji Islands area southward, and even here to the west. Somewhat relieves the pressure out here along the western part of the states and the areas here around South America, but for now that's not it's not happening. So I think we'll keep an eye on these regions pretty closely. Yellowstone National Park, not a whole lot going on here, folks. Sometimes we do see some swarming when we're in this type of situation here with this teeter-totter effect, but it's not looking like it's happening right now at all. Not a whole lot of earthquake activity to report there at the Yellowstone volcano. See what we got for space weather here real quick. This one's not showing the accurate data, so we'll click on it. Looks like we did have had a pretty good M flare pop off last night. Came in up there around the I don't know what it was, M6, I believe. Since then, we've had a couple upper C flares crackling from a new sunspot. That's going to be, I believe it's going to be 3057 or 3058, one of these two. It may be this one right here. This one's looking pretty mixed up in the magnetic field. There we go. Let's see. Solar activity reached moderate levels with the M2.8 solar flare detected. The flare was centered around new active region towards the northeastern limb. The region will be assigned AR 3058, so that's going to be this guy right here on the far side over here. These other ones, man, just a little disappointed. They grow. They get super big, the sunspots do, but when it comes to getting complex, getting the complex magnetic field, it's just not there to produce any type of flaring. Right now, there is still a C flare threat at 99% chance, M flare around 40, and X flare around 15, so somewhat elevated right now, and I'm sure it's got to do with the newly developed sunspots. Let's see here. Well, it's still showing quite a few of the older ones. 3058. Looks like we got some type of disturbance there on the aurora forecast, although I'm not seeing why. Oh, that could be it right here. We're looking at the BZ component in the interplanetary field, southward tilt, it looks like, allowing some of the speed, the wind stream here to come in, and the density looks elevated as well. That is kind of enhancing that aurora forecast, but for some reason I'm not seeing this doesn't look like it's updating. So let's see what they got for nothing really forecasted here for the 3-day geomagnetic forecast, but again, this is all subject to change, right? We get little events like this popping in when we're least expecting it, so we'll keep an eye on it for sure. Looks like some type of coronal hole here, a pretty large one, will be turning into view. It is in between these two sunspots, so that could get pretty interesting there if we get a couple CMEs from the sunspots themselves, along with a coronal hole. That could be a double whammy there for us here on Earth, so we'll have to watch that pretty closely. All right, guys, have a good day. We will be back a little bit later tonight. Got caught up last night outside. We were watching the space station fly over Northern California, so I didn't get a chance to do an update. It's a little late. So Missy Mimi's is feeling under the weather a little bit, so hopefully she'll be feel a little bit better here soon. Could be the heat, could be all the school work we're having to deal with, because she's we're both doing this studying together. Whole bunch of stuff I have to catch up on here by I think 9 o'clock tonight. So I'm gonna get started on that. Have a good day. Again, the Southern California earthquake watch is staying up until I think it's appropriate to bring it down. Right now I still think we're under the gun for some activity out here along the eastern Pacific, Southern California, and also the South America region, where we're swarming like crazy with a bunch of 2s and 3s and some deeper activity. Not a whole lot going on here. We do have a 3.2 coming in, but that's not really that big of a deal to relieve any pressure out here along the west coast right now. All right, guys, catch you a little bit later on this evening. Try to stay cool out there if you're in the heat. Peace out.